It's 2024, that's right, the year of the Bitcoin bull has finally arrived. I'm going to make the case for why this year might be Bitcoin's most explosive one yet. ETFs, the halving, narrative shifts, a Fed pivot in potential monetary easing, the beginning of the US presidential election cycle, and rising Bitcoin circular economies around the world are combining into a massive two-headed bull charging right into 2024. Prepare for impact. It's time to separate money from state. What's up everyone, I'm Hurley and we are still so early. Bitcoin turned 15 years old this week and she's not even old enough to drive yet. Today we're talking about all the stars that are aligning in 2024 to lead us to the early innings of a monstrous two-headed Bitcoin bull market. More on why I'm calling it a two-headed bull a bit later in the video. It didn't take long for Bitcoin's presence to be felt in 2024 as the price jumped up just shy of 46K earlier this week and a new wave of mainstream financial media talking heads quickly took notice. Here's a clip of MSNBC's Jim Kramer realizing that Bitcoin might not be dead after all.
All right, ahead of the open, which is about 2 minutes from now, take a look at Bitcoin. Above $45,000. That would be the first time since April of 22. Since April of 22, you can see, and obviously it had a great year last year.
Yeah, we got that clearing event of Sam Bankman-Fried. Going down, and that seemed to make people feel, you know what, we're safe. And then the ETF.
We continue to wait
endless
for the ETF.
Right. And look, it's very rare that I've ever seen that this way. Could it be a waiting for Godot? I mean, no, there won't be an ETF. But I do think that the people who are in it for that are going to use that as a chance to sell. But this thing is, you can't kill it.
No, you can't.
And the late Charlie Munger, who was so brilliant on so many things, was blind to this. Now you can say, wait a second, maybe it's all going to come
Jamie
unravel.
Dimon has not spared any negative words.
No, but look, I mean, it's a reality and it's a technological marvel, and I think people have to start recognizing that it's here to stay. The SEC's been against it almost the whole time.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean that every one of these is here to stay, but I do think that this is a remarkable comeback that was unexpected, except for all the bulls who turned out to be right.
Gensler does a lot of jawboning.
Didn't work.
You heard him, folks. You can't kill this thing. Side note, you can thank the all-knowing inverse Kramer for the swift dump back to 42K. All joking aside, it seems mainstream financial players are finally starting to realize Bitcoin is here to stay. This reminds me of the Economist article that dropped in December likening Bitcoin to a cockroach. In the article, they say, quote, "Many feel instinctive revulsion when they spy a roach, but in spite of their flaws, the bugs have uses. They turn decaying matter into nutrients and eat other pests, such as mosquitoes. Crypto has its use cases too, such as portfolio diversification and keeping money safe under despotic regimes. And as has been shown, it is just about impossible to kill." This article is in stark contrast to the November 2022 article in which they forecasted the downfall of crypto amongst the wreckage of the FTX collapse. It seems that Bitcoin dying and coming back from the dead for the fourth time is finally enough to convince these people that this thing just can't die. According to the Bitcoin obituaries website, 99bitcoins.com, the asset has been called dead 475 times and counting by media outlets since 2010. Are we finally seeing the beginning of the end of the infamous Bitcoin obituaries? This leads to the broader narrative change we're seeing towards Bitcoin, specifically as these ETFs get closer to approval. It's not a coincidence that shortly following the announcement of BlackRock's application for a spot Bitcoin ETF last summer, we began to see a flow of positive reports by investment firms and mainstream news outlets preaching that Bitcoin might actually be good for the environment and add resilience to energy grids. All-powerful BlackRock can't have the media spreading harmful FUD about their shiny new income stream once the ETF begins trading and they start collecting those juicy fees. Check the link above for a video I did on the Bitcoin marketing blitz that has already started as these ETFs get closer to approval. And as we get closer to ETF approval, the sentiment is beginning to shift towards cautious as talks of them already being priced in begin to surface. I for one find the idea that the ETFs are in any way priced in absolutely ridiculous. This is not some one-off positive news event like Tesla putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet. These ETFs represent a new paradigm of Bitcoin adoption. They open up over $48 trillion of US-based financial assets to Bitcoin exposure. And like what happened in the years following the gold ETF approval, the full and lasting effect they will have on the market price of Bitcoin won't be felt for several years. I did a video that goes in depth on the tsunami of capital coming for Bitcoin this cycle, linked to that above. So while the initial announcement of the ETF approvals might be priced in, the wave of capital that they will unlock in the months and years following their first day trading is absolutely not priced in. Speaking of priced in, the parabolic rise in hash rate is also not priced in. Marathon Digital Holdings, which trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol MARA, is the largest and most technologically advanced publicly traded Bitcoin miner, as well as one of the most energy efficient. They are also the second largest holders of Bitcoin among publicly traded companies in North America. Marathon's mission is to enhance the Bitcoin network by sustainably increasing the amount of computational power, or hash rate, that helps make Bitcoin the world's most decentralized and secure monetary network. So to recap, we have the changing mainstream narratives, the ETFs definitely not being priced in, and we add to that the fact that we're less than 16,000 blocks away from the next Bitcoin supply halving, that we're approaching a potential period of monetary easing with forecasted rate cuts, and all of this as we begin a fresh election cycle in the US, and we begin to see this glorious bull emerge in 2024. But as I said earlier, this isn't just any bull. This thing has two heads. To help explain what the hell I'm talking about, have a look at this clip of Lynn Alden on the What Bitcoin Did podcast earlier this week.
I think the next cycle, there's kind of two things I'm kind of looking at. One is I would call it macro 2.0. Kind of the meme last cycle was institutions are coming, and they never really came. I mean, around the margins they came. Hedge funds would trade Bitcoin. There's some entities that would do it, but for example, companies didn't really have the guts to follow Michael Saylor into Bitcoin corporate treasury. We didn't see any Bitcoin ETFs. And so this cycle, assuming that some of these Bitcoin ETFs get approved and, again, these institutions see another higher high, it kind of shakes them out of what they thought Bitcoin was. I think you could have more normalization among institutions and actually have, not just narratives about it, but actually allocations. And so I think that's one. Number two, for me, the more optimistic one is the rise of these little Bitcoin hubs. Bitcoin Beach is an obvious early example, but there's Bitcoin Jungle, there's Bitcoin Lake, there's Bitcoin Akasi. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. There's, I think, 2 years running the Bitcoin Indonesia conference. There's 2 years running the Africa Bitcoin conference. They're basically these little recurring hubs around the world and in some of the markets where it's most important. That I think is more powerful than even things like the Bitcoin Commons, Bitcoin Park, Real Bedford, PubKey, these pubs, these kind of locations within developed countries. I expect over the next cycle, those to reach more critical mass. So this cycle was like the cycle of like those coming into existence, or at least, after the initial few, there's been a spread of those. I actually did a podcast with Kathy Wood the other day. They like track this, and they kind of have like this number of how many of these little hubs that they're noticing. And it's like a crazy number per quarter. Most of them don't reach necessarily the awareness of the ones I mentioned, but there's a lot of these. If you fast forward 4 years, I expect these to be much bigger and more numerous. And that's in my view, one of the healthiest things that occurs. That'd be one of the healthiest types of cycles.
Lynn is talking about something I've been thinking about for a while now. There are two distinct narratives driving Bitcoin adoption that are gaining traction simultaneously and in parallel going into the upcoming bull market. There's of course the macro trend of institutions and nation states starting to take notice of the store of value narrative, but there's also the multiplying Bitcoin hubs that Lynn refers to here. These Bitcoin circular economies have been popping up all over the world over the last couple years, which started all the way back in 2019 with Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador and quickly inspired the likes of Bitcoin Lake in Guatemala, Bitcoin Jungle in Costa Rica, Bitcoin Akasi in South Africa, Bitcoin Island in the Philippines, and so many more. Just imagine what this looks like at the end of 2024. Now how about in 4 years? For me, these growing Bitcoin circular economies highlight the real optimistic adoption narrative heading into this cycle, and one that represents the ethos of Bitcoin and why it was created in the first place. Let it be the speculative store of value and investment vehicle in the financially privileged West. This financialization was always going to happen, and it will help drive global adoption and mainstream acceptance through the increase in price over the next several years. But Bitcoin is so much more than just a store of value or investment product. It's freedom money, an open, global medium of exchange that can't be censored by tyrannical governments or debased by central banks. Bitcoin is the separation of money and state. So I agree with Lynn that these Bitcoin circular economies popping up everywhere are a signal to where the Bitcoin narrative is headed this cycle, as trust in fiat money and the global financial system continues to crumble around the world. And this is also the main reason why buying real Bitcoin is so much better than any ETF. With an ETF, you simply have exposure to the fiat price of Bitcoin as an investment. Buying real Bitcoin gives you the ability to take full advantage of what this transformative monetary technology has to offer. With an ETF, you won't be able to go to any of these places around the world and take part in the emerging Bitcoin economy. the one already separated from the nation-state's greedy and corrupt grasp. These microeconomies are an early glimpse of the bright orange future ahead, where people's time and energy isn't stolen from them through inflation, and where true free markets of value are emerging. So, as we enter 2024 and Bitcoin inches 1 year closer to becoming an adult, the narratives around adoption begin to evolve before our very eyes. In the financially privileged West, it's entering a new era as a viable store of value and hedge against currency debasement. In developing countries and those stuck with the shit end of the stick of the pyramid scheme that is our global monetary system, a new, more just monetary system and medium of exchange is taking root and spreading quickly. All the stars are aligning to all but guarantee an absolutely wild 2024 for Bitcoin. But if this is your first cycle, remember that this ride will most definitely be a bumpy one. Expect insane euphoria, crushing FOMO, and gut-wrenching corrections and price dumps along the way. No one said separating money from state would be easy. Take the ride, stay humble, and save your time and energy in Bitcoin, and you will be rewarded. So what do you think? What's the bigger narrative for Bitcoin adoption this cycle? Is it the ETFs in institutional or perhaps even nation-state adoption? Or is it the emergence and proliferation of these Bitcoin circular economies around the world? Leave a comment with your thoughts, like this video, and subscribe to the Swan Bitcoin channel for more content like this. Also, check out my video from last week on the Bitcoin marketing blitz underway and the potential for a Bitcoin Super Bowl commercial this year, and the one on the factors that mega bull Michael Saylor says will lead to a Bitcoin price of $5 million per coin. Until next time, Bitcoin is peace.